Well, good day, folks, and welcome back to the Secret Solve. That's right, this is a program where we look at the secret, the images, and the verses, and we try to come up with some reasoning as to where the potential solve location could be for these secret puzzles. Today I'm working on the first puzzle, which is the one that many people believe to be in San Francisco. And since this is a mostly narration type of program, I'm just going to give you a few links to look at. They're in the description. And from those links, you might be able to come up with the ideas that I'm talking about. It would be handy to have your book, The Secret, out, a copy of the images and the verses as we work through this. Well, most people are pretty impatient and they really just want to know where do you think the secret is? Where do you think the location is? And so I'm just going to start with that. And I'm going to say that I think that the San Francisco image relates to a story about some people from the San Francisco area, a couple of authors, and has its roots based in um, some stories that go along with the South Pacific, that go along with things that might have happened around Catalina Island around this time, and a boating accident, and some things like that. And so I believe that the location is the Louis Stevenson Fountain. And this is in Portsmouth Square. And so if you'll follow along and look at the Wikimedia California image of the pedestal base and also the inscription. And basically, the inscription says to remember Robert Louis Stevenson, to be honest and to be kind, to earn. Okay. If you go through this text, you will get to the word task. And what I would want to point out is that there is a verse that says, your task, start your task at the 982. Now, I believe this has been misinterpreted for years. And the reason I think that is because this monument also has the word delicacy, which I believe to also mean delight. There is a hole in this fountain, if you will, where the water used to come out. But the fountain is no longer um, the fountain part of the monument is no longer functioning. But there is indeed some fish up here at the top. There's the boat itself. And so let's just go back to the image again, image number one. And I want to point a few things out that a lot of people aren't considering. And that is if you look at the clock sitting on the table in the let's say K4 area, if you closely look at the lips of the leaf, that actually is a fish face. So you may have to enlarge the image a little bit and look at the lips and then look at the two little side where we have the nice little fins, and then look at the top. There's another little fin. And if you compare that to the image of the Robert Louis Stevenson monument, you will notice that there is a fish with that same appearance. It's almost like it's a little bit of a puffer fish. And there's one of these on each of the corners of the monument. So there's one of these on each of the four corners of the monument. Okay, let's go back and look again at the secret image a bit. Let's go up here to like the CD area at the top, and let's go look at the 5, maybe 5, 6 area, right below what people consider to be a fence type of structure. And let's look closely at that. I see a pedestal base. I see a pedestal base sitting right there in the middle of the rock face. And if I look at the shape of the top of that pedestal base and I compare it to the Robert Louis Stevenson Monument, I would say that that is the same pedal base that we might want to be considering. And then now that you look at the rock structure up at the top with the actual gate, we can go back to the image and look for that detailing. Now, what we need to do here is to look directly in the background at this door that leads into a building called the Empress, or a building next to the Empress. And so I would say there's also a possibility that the grate could also be the grate that was sitting back behind the fountain in 2013, back when this picture was taken. Now let's go look at the way in which the letters are engraved on the Robert Louis Stevenson monument. And then let's go look at the image of a little bit. And if you look at this image detail, you'll get down here and you'll see part of the tail. You'll start at the bottom and the tail squiggles up a few times. But there's this B and this D, or this 6 and this D in the image, and they're carved into the image wall. I'm talking about the M and N area, approximately in the between the 5 and 6. And so we have that, you have the same type of, B and D, the delight, if you will, right there carved into the image. And then if you look at how that is also structured, you can see how that looks very, very familiar. Once you look at the black background at the top, and you see these round images, uh, you know, are these Chinese, balloons? Are they circular for a reason? We'll go on and explain that here in a little bit, and then of course we've got the petal of the rose flower. And if you notice how that rose petal flower that's facing to the image figure, look at that rose petal and the lips on that rose petal, and then go back to the Robert Louis Stevenson monument again and look at the detail on the fish and how those lips are formed on that particular image as well. Okay, so let's just say that you want to think about this more as a location. The next thing you might want to do is go look at the building in Chinatown, which is the Lum. It's on 25 or 35 Lum. It's a 35 Walter U. Lum Place. And this is the old Empress of China building. It's the Empress of China. So this is a landmark fixture, well-known building in Chinatown. Special permission, I think, was given to actually build above a certain number of floors. And I don't know if they had to get an exemption at the time. There's a story of how when they were putting this building, there was no way to get a hotel up there, and they rented a crane. And anyway, they put a piano into this building with the crane. But anyway, look at the round circular items at the top, and then kind of look at the architectural detail of this building. Now let's go back to the image again, now that you have that in your mind, and let's look over there towards the right-hand side in the OMN section adjacent to the image figure, and look in that background. We're over here in the 8 and 7 area. And then go back and look at that building, and then come back and look at this image. Do that a couple of times. Do you start to see the image of that round building in that background? Well, it may take a few minutes for that to register, but as soon as you start thinking that building and start looking at the background, it'll maybe come to life a little bit better. Okay, so I've got a map of Portsmouth Square, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at Portsmouth Square, And I'm going to work backwards from the Robert Louis Stevenson monument and see where it takes me. So again, open up the browser, try to put Portsmouth Square down into the lower, let's say, right-hand side of your screen. And let's try to work backwards from the Portsmouth Square. And I'm just going to start, let's say, at the entryway. And I don't know if the streets will go the right direction or not. But I'm going to start at the corner of Washington Street and um, Grant Avenue. And I like Grant Avenue because if you want to use the verse, get permission to dig out, a permission would be a grant, but they've got that. So anyway, never mind. Okay, so if you start at the corner and you go 1 block on Washington, and then you go 1 block on Stockton, and then you go 1 block on Jackson, and then you go 1 block up to Pacific, and then you go 1 block over to Mason. Then you get on Broadway and go 1 block over to, whatever street that is. You'll get to this Ina Coolbrith Park. So you're at the Ina Coolbrith Park. Well, who is she? Well, I just happened to look her up the other day, and I found out that Ina Donna Coolbrith is Josephine Donna Smith. And she was an American poet, prominent figure in the San Francisco Bay Area. She was the sweet singer of California. But in the back of the book, they mention a good number of Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints information. And this information has to do with the quarterback and a couple of founders of one of the companies that's mentioned, the traffic light. There's a lot of information in the back of the book about the Mormons, Salt Lake City, and Joseph Smith. And so she is actually a descendant of that family. In the back of the book, they also have a story that brings to light Jack London. And then finally, another important factor is she joined the Bohemian Club of San Francisco. And the San Francisco Bohemian Club is important because if you look at in the back of the book, one of the first stories is of what I consider Chris Christopherson sitting in a bohemian type of, lifestyle in California, where we have this guy rising out of the water trough tank sitting on a pedestal. And these people basically are sitting in this water, and this water is sitting on top of this pedestal base. So anyway, if you look at the West Coast, this idea of being in a boat on water kind of makes sense to me, and the whole bohemian lifestyle. The other thing is that Robert Frost is mentioned in the back of the book. And the other thing is, the other quote that they have here is that had to do with lavender. She was also selected to open a ball with Pio Pico, who was the last Mexican governor of California. She married an iron worker and part-time actor, and unfortunately, she suffered some abuse from this guy. Okay. Anyway, she was acquaintances with Bret Hart and Mark Twain. And Charles Henry Webb. But I don't want to spend too much time on her. But anyway, I put her biography in there. Okay, so also from that point of that park, you can see very well. It's a viewing point from the city, if you will, to look at the city. It's interesting that if you go 1 block up and 1 block over, you're on Jones Street. And in the section that kind of talks about some people from San Francisco and the California area, you get the story that was written about the Jonestown Massacre. And this is where this guy by the name of Jones convinced a bunch of people to drink some Kool-Aid. There's a story in the back of the book about Flavor Aid, if you will. And we're moving up to Union Street and then over to Jones Street, up to Filbert Street, and then up to Greenwich, and then over to Lombard Street. Now, once you get to Lombard Street, you have to go zigzag, 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 zigzag. And after you get done with your zigzagging, you get to 982 Lombard, which intersects with Hyde Street. Well, in case you didn't know, Robert Louis Stevenson wrote the book Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So when you start looking through the book and you get to all these doctor references and you wonder, why are there so many doctor references in this book? Do some of these stories have to do with doctors? Well, certainly the one in Boston would have to do with Andy Papulo, who was studying to be a doctor with the Harvard Law School, or not Harvard Law School, but the Harvard School. And so I'm just wondering, does this stair-step idea of Robert Louis Stevenson having started at Hyde Street and Lombard Street, which is 982, and then ending at the Task at Portsmouth Square, does this have any merit? Well, I wondered about that, and then I went to the back of the book and said, are there any instances in the back of the book where they talk about stair steps, or where they talk about, following so many steps to get somewhere? And I found several instances where they actually mentioned using that type of methodology. So I honestly think that the puzzle for San Francisco has to do with taking your task to the 982, following the stair step down, which this will parallel basically the street that goes through Washington. What is this long street that goes from Conrad Square, DiMaggio Park, Washington Square? So if you parallel that, that's Columbus Avenue, by the way. Many people think this image figure looks like Columbus. Well, I mean, I think it could, but I think it actually looks like Natalie Wood. And Natalie Wood was a famous person that came from the Russian Hill area of San Francisco. And in fact, a lot of her, growing up is talked about in this Russian Hill area. So the Russian Hill was named basically because of the plaque atop the Russian Hill at the end of Vallejo Street, a block above Ina Coolbrith Park, describes how the burial of several Russian sailors gave the hill its name. So this Russian Hill neighborhood is basically named after that. And then this is actually a point where you can view a lot of the places in San Francisco. So this Russian Hill is a very good spot for viewing the rest of San Francisco. And in fact, looking north from Russian Hill, Alcatraz and Angel Island across the water, a large sand dune separates Black Point, today's Fort Mason, from Russian Hill. And so there's an article here that talks about, and there is a octagon house on Green Street at Leavenworth at the top of Russian Hill, and it's one of the original 8-sided homes built in the 9th century of San Francisco. Okay, so there's another, let's say, wayfaring marker to look at. Um, so my solve idea is based upon this connection to Robert Louis Stevenson and some of the books that he wrote. And if you are familiar with him, he wrote Treasure Island, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which I mentioned, Kidnapped, and A Child's Garden of Verses. This just almost sounds like a laundry list of the things that are mentioned in all of the stories. But one of the important things is that he spent time where he lived in Samoa. And Samoa is basically, it's in the, I don't know, I guess, uh, Pacific, if you will. And it would give you all of the references to natives from that part of the world. Um, so his father, Robert, was a civil engineer, and his brothers were in the same field. And they built lighthouses, ironically. So they designed these lighthouses, and wouldn't it be ironic that you would have the story about a guy that might have designed a lighthouse having something to do this with this? Uh, and they also trace their history back to the Balfour family as well. Uh, So he was basically because of bronchitis and the family, he needed to basically survive in areas that were climatically warmer, and that's why he ended up over in where he did. So he ended up marrying a woman that was quite older than him. After going on some adventures in Europe, he met this woman. She was married at the time. She had a child, but her husband was messing around on her. He was, going to strike it rich. He never did. She eventually divorced him and moved to San Francisco, where he, on his deathbed, made a commitment to come visit her and made his way out there. And if you look at the mustache on the image figure, you're wondering, why does this image figure have a mustache? Well, it could have to do with the fact that we're looking at Robert Louis Stevenson uh, composite in with and all the stories he wrote about the high seas, like Kidnapped and the wreckage, and basically every story he wrote about were very similar to what happened to Natalie Wood uh, at sea. But I'll let you read through all of his different books and how they would fit directly into this Saul location. And but the main thing is that uh, if you look at the image figure and you put a mustache on it, and you look at Stevenson, um, yeah, you could come up with the idea that maybe if the task is the 982, that this would make some sense. Okay, so going back to the verses and going back to the book. So, like I said, I'm a believer in a one-to-one relationship. This has been proven, by the way, if you go look at the Cleveland solve and you use the correct solve for the Chicago puzzle, and you disregard anything they say about the puzzle that they said was found in Boston using whatever image they used, 11. And if you use the Boston image number 2, which is the correct image for Boston, uh, you will figure out that they're one-to-one relationship. So let's just go through this one. Fortress North, cold as glass. Okay, everybody thinks that's Alcatraz. Friendship South. Take your task to the number 982. Now, what we did that, and we got to 982 Woodward, where it intersects with Hyde Street, right? So through the wood, no lion fears. That's obviously the Russian Hill, Natalie Wood, Deadwood area. In the sky, the water veers. Small of scale, step across. Okay, a scale basically, have you ever seen a scale where you go over one, up one, over one, up one? over 1, up 1. The scale is a step across, over 1, up 1, over 1, up 1. Perspective should not be lost. In other words, you've got to keep doing a square, a Portsmouth square, if you will. So then you get actually to Portsmouth square. In the center of 4 alike, small split, 3 winged, and slight. So the 4 alike, there's these 4 fish with the small split in the lip. 3 winged and slight. Look at the boat sails. What we take to be our strongest tower of delight falls gently in December night. Okay, so the confirmation here is December is when Robert Louis Stevenson died. Looking back from Treasure Ground, there's the spout. That's the spout in the Robert Louis Stevenson marker. A whistle sounds. Well, you can do a number of things for this one, but in a specific story, Stevenson wrote about a whistle. But in the city of San Francisco, this could mean any number of whistles. So anyway, I think that you use this stair-stepping methodology to get you to your final location. Now I'm going to go look at the book. And this may take a while because I have lots of notes on the back of the book in various different stories. Okay, so the back of the book starts off with a story about a maitre demon. Well, the maitre demon is, basically Robert Wagner, who in his past was a waiter. And then you go to the sweat slips. Now, the sweat slips has in the background a picture of the prime meridian marker in Florida. So I don't think that particular story is about this one. The next one is the Preps Ghoul story. And I think this is about Ted Bundy. And he is the Prep School Ghoul in Tallahassee, Florida. So I don't think that one relates to this puzzle. The next one is the West Ghost. And this one I do indeed think is part of this, because on page 65 of the back of the book, you have the Bohemian Society. You have Jones drifting up out of the water, out of the tub, if you will, and is got his mind controlling those people that are in that tub. So I think that probably explains what's going on in that story. The Pilgrim, I believe, is related to New York, and so I don't think that one has any clues. The Freudian Sylphs, on page 69, you have stories about Ronald Reagan and Nixon, both famous Californians. And you also have a guy in glasses with slanted eyes who said something bad. And I think that probably is Stanford. Because he used to make fun of the Chinese all the time. The other guy is obviously MLK, and the other one's Daley. The Screaming Mimi, I believe the Screaming Mimi is the Lindbergh baby, and that all of this particular has to do with the St. Louis baby kidnapping of the Lindbergh baby. The Joke Fiend, I believe, is about Kansas, because it says JF, corny as Kansas, visits Henny Youngman for good material. So the Hungry Eye Club was at the Columbus Tower. Just FYI, that's part of that. It's believed that Robert Louis Stevenson died from a bad formulation of mayonnaise. And on page 75, you have in the front, you have gold, which is the California gold. And then over here, you have the mayonnaise, which led to Robert Louis Stevenson's death. The ice cube, by the way, was invented in 1000 BCE when the Chinese or the refrigerator was invented in 1000 BC, when the Chinese decided to cut some ice to store some food. Refrigeration, by the way, began in Jamestown, New York, the modern refrigerator. Then the Scrabopibus, I believe, is about Jamestown, and so I don't think there's any stories in there about this one. The Gardengoyle goes with Cleveland, so I think he's more matched to that. The Saucer's Apprentice. Wow, he could be used in a number of different places. Because the top guy is James Beard and the bottom one is Julia Child on page 81. And, I guess there would be some slight relationship here to the island. The Handyman Court, that one goes with Jamestown, Celeron, New York area. The Double Dogs, I believe that one probably goes... well, it's got furniture. It's got furniture with it, so I think that mainly probably has to do with Kansas. The next one has to do the back here, Barber Creek. There's nothing in there. Okay, the Team Spirits. Here we go. We've got a guy with Giants and an SF on the top of his hat. Well, I probably would say that might be confirmation that we're looking for something in San Francisco. At least some people think that way. And then the Boogeyman, most definitely the picture over here of the Boogeyman has in the background the painted ladies. And are we looking at Russian Hill? Or is that what we're looking at in the background here with the painted ladies in the front and the Parker in the front? So allegorically, you have this big, wide open, funky looking instrument. And then behind that, you have the painted ladies. And then far off in the background, you have the Russian Hill, right? And that angle is the 45-degree angle that you would take. And as you read about Robert Louis Stevenson, you'll find out that the 45 and the 90-degree angle are important. And in fact, under the Boogeyman, it says, sweat and cool in a clubfoot step, so square when it was hip to be hep. And so the lips are the key here. So what it's saying is that when you match this image on 93, you've got the lips, right? You get the lips because the guy's playing the saxophone. And what you need to do is identify the lips in the image, which is in the rose petal and also in the rose flower, and come to the conclusion that they're some sort of pufferfish. In other words, those lips, the face in this image of the guy on 93 is blown up, and his entire face kind of looks like a pufferfish, if you will, which I don't know where you could get yourself a good pufferfish. But so the mind boggles. The image figure in this is basically Marquette, staring at somebody that's eating popcorn. So that one probably goes with the one that people think are in Wisconsin. And the next one, you have Belushi eating a goldfish. Right? That's John Belushi on page 96. He's eating a goldfish, right? His lips are ready to eat a fish. So you got that going on right there. You got a beard. There's a lot of information in page 97. 97 includes little tiny rebus solves for different locations. Like if you split these pictures up, you can get a solve for a couple of different locations out of that image. Of course, Belushi is a Chicago reference. There's a chateau for those who like Montreal. The guy juggling's not going to be related. Captain Kangaroo holding the stick. I think that goes to Fort Knox, Kentucky. The Mr. Green Jeans Captain Kangaroo sitting on the pre-revolution. He's pretty much down there. The Philharmonic Orc is probably Boston because we got Arthur Fiedler. Culture Vultures, that one probably has to do more with Cleveland. The Passing Fancies has to do with, I think, multiple puzzles because there's a lot in that one. Teen Angel, I don't think he's relevant. The Damon Runyon. So, I don't even know if people have this right. And the solve for this one is in San Francisco, because I can just as easily put together a nice little solve using the Runyon Canyon in Los Angeles, using the petrified forest there, and coming up with a good solve idea. But it would be nice to tell you that on page 113 that dice games were invented in China. And I'm pointing out the dice game because if you look at the building that used to be the Empress, it's got these round black spots where the windows are, right? And it kind of looks like a dice if you would two stacked upon each other. And you have here on 113 dice stacked upon each other, and that building looks to me like dice that are kind of, and that goes along with the whole square, the Portsmouth Square, the square dice. And if you look at the guy's tie in page 113, he's wearing the Coit Tower on his tie. And so, I don't know, it just kind of, and then the other thing is, they're talking in this article about the Calaveras County jumping frog, if you will. And it'd be good to know that the cards originated in China, which might help you explain 112. If you like the OHZE reference in the yogurt on 115, you could possibly relate that to the Zhao dynasty, and then later the Song dynasty of China, and educate yourself a little bit about those two dynasties and how they could relate to the puzzle. The Kinder Gargantuan. So, has anybody ever actually looked at the Kinder Gargantuan on page 119 and noticed how the image in the back is pouring water, like the pouring water in the other image for the Chicago? So basically what I'm saying here is that the Perard drawings were runner-up drawings for the book. And that if you can successfully match a Perard drawing to another drawing that Palancar did, you might get additional information as to where the actual dig spot is. The guy that's hung over, that's probably has to do with Fort Knox. The Djinn Rummy definitely has to do with Fort Knox. What else do we have? Oh, we're down to the Filthy Hobbit. The Filthy Hobbit's obviously got a face that looks like a basketball, so that's going to probably go along with Celeron, unless you like the idea that that guy's face could be a pufferfish. And they do mention Puff the Magic Dragon lives by the sea in the story. And so if you like the idea of a pufferfish, that could work. The Alibi Elf, if you look at the drawing, that building there is actually in Kansas. You can find that actual building in the background. I think the Alibi Elf has a sausage in it and a doctor. I didn't look close enough. I don't think there's anything there. But it's interesting to know that the Japanese invented beeswax. And in this story where they're talking about beeswax, they're mentioning Washington. And Washington's one of the streets that you would take if you were going to follow that path that I gave you to get there. The Leprechaun, that's Boston. That's Kennedy. That's the Kennedys. That's the Boston. 130, 131. That's talking about the Kennedys getting drunk and going to Chappaquiddick and unfortunately not knowing how to drive, some lady dying in a car, which National Lampoon magazine wrote about back in the day. So when you get to the left wing simp and the right wing trog, I think that story is about New York. It's about the Dakota Hotel. And the Dakota Hotel is the place where there's a north entrance and a south entrance, and it's right next to Central Park. And a guy by the name of Chapman uh, did a little bad thing, and the odd couple are John Lennon and Yoko Ono. Such an odd couple. Oh, by the way, a little note on John Lennon and Yoko Ono. They did spend some time in San Francisco. Mugwumps. Okay, so here's where the jigsaw happens. So, if you go to page 151, you have this object sitting on the top of the building, and you have, I think that's, I don't know, I think that's Frost. I think that's David Frost down at the bottom, and it's about ready to roll off the roof, but after it rolls off the roof, it's got to go down this jigsaw puzzle of a set of stairs on the side. So why would there be those stairs where that ball has to roll off unless they're trying to tell you that there's a puzzle that has to do with zigzagging, if you will, back and forth to reach the ultimate destination. It's almost like Plinko. So I kind of maybe the San Francisco solve is just all about playing Plinko. And you just roll it off. It's good to know that London was actually born in San Francisco, if you want to read the back of the book. And they're going to talk about the back of the book under the bugbear specifically. So the foul sewer ogres, the guy in the water there is Gary Hart. He was born in Ottawa, Kansas. Went to Denver, Colorado. He was involved in some interesting stuff. Tutti Frutti's hanging on the gas thing. The geodesic gnome, I think, goes to Wisconsin because if you look at the bases that are in the park, they're at Pierre Marquette. You know, those bases all are basically look like that. And then the lattice type building design there kind of matches in there. The Spirit of St. Louis, I think there's no need to take much more of that. I think the Toronto Gort, she could actually be Barbara Frum or Janie Canuck. If it's Emily Gowan Ferguson, she was really anti-Chinese. But I don't think that's the reference that they're going for here. The Nymphomane. Get to the other ones, I think. Okay. Finally, let's get to the Jack-o'-lectern. I think the Jack-o'-lectern is a pretty decent 176 story, and then 177 that will help us in solving the one for San Francisco and the people that eat pufferfish. So here at the bottom, the jack-o'-lantern sabotaging a lecture at the University of North Carolina. Well, basically 232, which is if you take the 2 and then you add the 32, that's the amount of pufferfish per pound in micrograms. That's a lethal dose if you should eat some pufferfish. The lectern is a place where your lips would move and you would be talking into a microphone, right? I think the shape of the microphone here has a specific instance, but I'm the most interested in this fish with the big eyes. The pufferfish, if you will, that's in this image of 177. So you got this circle, and it's a close-up view of this fish with its mouth open, and it's got hands instead of of fins. And I think that if you look at those images, you've definitely got that fin thing going on. So on the next page, you've got the Tinkerbells, and at the bottom on 178, you got a picture of like a pagoda sitting on top of a phone. And that reeks all to me of the Portsmouth Square idea, the pagoda thing. And where else would you find a bunch of Tinkerbells? I mean, if you were looking for Tinkerbells in 1980, I think I'd go to San Francisco to find my Tinkerbells. In the story about Tinkerbells, interestingly enough, it says, so Tinkerbells are now active in every country in the world. Many nations can be reached by one of their favorite innovations, direct dialing. If you can remember a 39-digit number sequence, you can greatly simplify international communications. You must remember that a sound like a monkey's death cry is a French busy signal, and a deep, fat fryer noise, like in a Chinese restaurant, means a phone is ringing in Portugal. Anyway. So it's also nice to know about the Tinkerbells that the telephone line was really early installed, and part of that was 982 Market Street was where that line would have ran. Oh, by the way, Gardner Green Hubbard is an important member of the he was appointed by he descended from Lyon Gardner, and that was a Harvard grad. And he was appointed by Grant. The Hounds of News. Well, I guess I'll talk about this on this show. It's gone quite a while. So I mentioned earlier that if you take the Perard drawings and consider them the runner-up drawing, if you will, you can maybe figure out some additional information about another puzzle. And I think the Hounds of News story is pretty firmly about the Hounds of News that were in Wisconsin, in Milwaukee, if that's a location. Because if you look, you've got the typewriter, and we mentioned earlier in the solve for Milwaukee that the QWERT typewriter was invented in Milwaukee. And if you take the bar in this picture, you've got a couple of dog bones over here, and you've got a beer drink, right? You've got Snoopy up here at the top. And, if you like Snoopy, then you may need to go look for this in Santa Clara, because the guy that wrote that is from there. But anyway, so if you take the elbow of the bar and you consider that to be the corner of State Street, okay, basically the edge of the table would encompass the bald guy, and the bald guy would have this, I guess, towel on his arm, right? Well, the bald guy in this image then would be the Pierre Marquette, because he was kind of like a short, bald guy, right? And then behind him is this guy with this funky hat on. And if you look at his hat, it's not really square. The artist took the liberty of making that hat basically be two sides of the marker that sits there for Pierre Marquette Park. And so then above his head is a light. So basically, you've got the street where the typewriter is, and the invention of the typewriter. Then you've got the guy that looks like Marquette, balding guy. And then behind him, you have the marker that's in the park. He's again drinking a beer. And you've got all these hot dogs in here. And you've got that lamp above his head. All right, the nomenclature. I don't think there's anything specific in this one for this. I think there's just one more. Oh, no, there isn't. The calcubus. So where did I get this strange and weird idea that you might have to do this down and over uh, exercise to get from Hyde Park down to the other? I got it from the blackboard here. And the blackboard says there's an open book exam today. And again, this is another one of these fantastical drawings that give you a bunch of clues, but you don't know they're clues until you know where the solve location is. So number 9 here, who's studying really too hard, the kid in the Coke bottle glasses, you can guess who he might be. But I'm pretty sure this is the Chicago Bears quarterback that graduated from BYU, because over here, you know, it has him, and he's wearing a Chicago Bears jersey. And if you look at the bird on the top of his head, I believe that's a famous sculpture that's in Grant Park. But I don't know. I'm sure the back of the book doesn't really mean anything. Okay, the Postmaster General. I'm going to skip over him. Okay, I already talked about the typographical terrors. Okay, so the Apple, Steve Jobs is another connection to San Francisco. Okay, now maybe it's time to talk about his time at Reed College in Portland. And how his dad was an adoptive father, and he built cabinets. Okay, glitches. You realize on page 193 that is the actual. If you would go to the very top of the Empire State Building, that and could stand on it, that's what you'd actually see in the corporate giants. But again, I don't think there's anything there. The corporate giants, the other image, and that is the Perard drawing on page 195, corresponds to the number 6 drawing. So the runner-up drawing for the number 6 puzzle that Perard did is on page 195. Because you have simply the same elements that were in the Perard area as you would have in the cascading number 6. Once you get down to it, you have some animals in the bottom of it. You have the rocks in it. You have the murky water. You have pollution coming out the side. And then you have a coal gasification plant on his belly, on the hill. So if you go to Tallahassee, Florida, and you look at the old photographs of the park there, you will see that on one side of the park was the Florida Game and Fisheries buildings, and then you had the water that was from an old, I don't know, an old something or other. And then over there you have the coal gasification plant. And the nose, by the way, his nose is the prime meridian marker. Okay, so then you've got the toll trolls, and okay, that one doesn't relate. Okay, now we're back to the rich doctor. So remember we were talking about these doctors before, and how I think that they have a lot to do with some of these puzzles. And if you're talking about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, if you look at the image on page 209, you have the wind-up guy smoking a pipe as one version of the guy that's in the office. And then you have this other guy who is down at the bottom. But you also have a tie here to Boston, because you have the physician symbol that appears in image number 2. So again, you have the same emblem image of medicine in number 2 that goes along with the image on 209 being the rich doctor. I honestly believe that lady that's standing there is the Bowman. Her name's Bowman, And I think that's Ted Bundy sitting at the desk. And Dr. Jekyll and Bundy pretty much did the same thing. And you notice how there's hair above the hair of the woman in this particular painting? Well, that just go look at the hair on the image figure. They go together. The Perard drawing here is the backup and assisting drawing for Boston and perhaps Tallahassee. But then on the next page, you have the guy holding the saw. Well, the saw would be again a step, if you will. And then in the next one, you have on 211 a guy looking downward at a bunch of stair steps. Okay. Then on the next page, you have a guy standing at a bunch of stair steps. And at the end of the stair steps is a pedestal. So the tax burden, the exploding bag, could be a number of things. It could go with a couple of different ones. Especially, it could go with Boston, where the sugar tank exploded. It could be a puffer fish. Maybe it goes with this one, and it's a puffer fish. All right, well, that's my review of the secret back of the book and anything that I think has to do with San Francisco. I'm pretty much done with San Francisco. I actually think San Francisco's in Catalina, on Catalina Island. I think it's actually at the Banning Bench. But nobody wants to take serious my inferences that this is a story about Robert Wagner and the ill-fated voyage of the Splendor. Oh, yeah, the Splendor in the grass. Okay, folks, I'm going to check, see if anybody joined in. Nobody joins in. I kept it under an hour, so I'm happy. So if you are interested in looking for this one in San Francisco, I would just go back to Portsmouth Square. I would follow the stair step down from the Wiggly. So basically my solve is you go to Lombard and Hyde Street. And you take off and you go down the 8 steps to get to Leavenworth. And then you just go from Leavenworth to Filbert, Filbert to Union, Union to Green, Green to Mason, Mason to Powell, Powell to Stockton, Stockton over to Jackson Street, Jackson Street to Grant, Grant over to Portsmouth. And it's a nice little stair step down from Hyde Park, confirming that once you find the spout on the Robert Louis Stevenson statue, it's time to dig out.